certain top tier characters, have they been dealt with fully, or are there still some that need to be directly dealt with?
Answer is hell freaking yeah. Urian, Rashid, Cammy, her super, once you do a ton of damage on it and, you know, the most easy hit confirms on the planet, you get a double dash for great Okazemi. That's just a really fundamentally stupid design decision and should not be in the game.
Do we want a changing of the guard at the top tier? Do we want to see some fresh faces in tournament, like top 8s and stuff along those lines, and not just like 3 Rashids, 2 Cammies, and then maybe roll the dice for a Urian and a Bison? Not necessarily just buffing low tiers, but making low tiers feel satisfying to play even where they're at. And so in some cases, that's going to mean they're going to need to move up, because maybe the expectations for a character are not congruent with where they actually are in the tier list. People will accept that their character is not as good as the next character. That's okay. What they want to do is have a game plan with that character that is satisfying and possible.
Welcome back to another episode of EventHubs Talk and Block. I am John Catalyst Gray, and with me as always is John Velociraptor Guerrero.
Another episode. It's the very first episode. Actually, no, we put the Talk and Block logo into the previous episode that we recorded some 2 weeks ago, right? Yeah. So I don't know. I'm all over the place. We have been in such fun but chaotic transition over the last week or two. Yes, the EventHubs podcast has evolved into EventHubs Presents Talk and Block.
Boom.
And that's the official new name for our show. Hope you guys like it. Please let us know how much you like it. And those of you that don't like it, just don't say anything at all.
Leave your feedback. We love the feedback for the show and stuff like that. But yeah.
No. Those of you that wanted to say something mean, just psycho crush the like button for us, and there you go. So before we get too far into it this week, we're going to talk about, some pretty interesting stuff. The way we want to see Street Fighter V changed, and maybe the way we might want to see some older Street Fighters changed. Before we jump into that, I want to tell our faithful listeners here a little bit about what happened, just very briefly. Okay, so basically, we had an existing YouTube channel that was dormant, and we had not used it in a few years. And it was, unbeknownst to me, tied to a multi-channel network relationship with our previous ad company, which was MLG. Okay, so we got that that YouTube channel up and going. We started posting on it. We got it monetized, and then we found that it was connected to MLG. What does that mean? It means that all of the money and the revenue was actually being funneled still to some account with MLG, whom EventHubs no longer is affiliated with, and is actually was acquired by Activision. Yeah. So we spent a whole bunch of time trying to get in contact with
John,
MLG.
Hold on. Are you saying that EventHubs was acquired by Microsoft? Because Microsoft bought Blizzard Activision.
Oh. We went our separate ways with MLG in 2017. I believe that was when they were purchased, right? Yeah. We're no longer affiliated with them. Yeah. So we spent a bunch of time trying to get in contact with someone who knew, that could basically unlock things from Activision / MLG's end, because YouTube didn't help us much. Thanks, YouTube. Really love you. You're the best. Anyways, long story short. Yeah. Or whatever. I don't care. We'll go somewhere else. I feel completely equipped to transition, go somewhere else, whatever.
Is MySpace still going? Because we can go over there. So yeah.
Put us in your top 8. So basically we had to, Activision couldn't do anything about it. We eventually got in contact with them. We couldn't do anything about it, and YouTube refused to do anything about it. So basically we could keep staying on that old channel, and all of our money would go to some unknown account that I don't even know if the people that are getting the money know they're getting the money. But no longer dealing with that, so we're jumped over to this other old channel, and we are in the process of monetizing it. We need 4,000 public watch hours, so if you don't mind, watch this a few times. And we really appreciate you guys coming along with us for this journey and continuing to support us. We are now excited to say that now that we've made this transition, we can actually start having an inflow of cash, and I can justify to my big boss doing some cool new things with that cash if it ever eventually starts flowing in, and we can make this show even better, level it up in some creative and exciting ways beyond just calling it something differently. So that's the gist of what's been going on in our lives for the last 2 weeks or so. John, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that before we jump on?
Yeah, I know that Activision Blizzard's got a lot of stuff going on in the news and stuff about them, but the representative that helped us there was super awesome about everything. Nothing on their end that they could have done. It was just really on YouTube's end, and they just kind of any content creator on YouTube that you guys see up there, they have to deal with a lot of crap to make their channels work. So realize that that is,
send them a fruit basket.
Yeah.
You know, send your favorite content creators fruit baskets.
Yeah, they deal with a lot. So but anyway, hey, you know, it's we're no strangers to starting over. You know, we took the L, on our chest, and now we're back, and we're going to be better than ever. So that's how we're looking at it.
Hell yeah. Okay, so jumping into it, this week we are discussing what we want from Street Fighter V's potential final major balance update, right? So it's in March that we were going to get Capcom Cup, no longer getting Capcom Cup there, but the scheduled balance overhaul change is slated for sometime in March. I don't have it off the top of my head, but and so of course when you ask like, well, what do you want them to do with the game, an easy answer in a perfect world would be something like, well, I'd like them to nerf the top tiers, buff the low tiers, and basically make every character's risk and reward finely tuned and balanced so that they're all fun to play. And yeah, but of course we don't live in a perfect world. You're dealing with a team that has a finite amount of mana to devote to all of this. They're probably distracted with designing Street Fighter 6. And so it's more of like a discussion for the community to sort of finalize and get a clear idea of what they want to see changed about the game in some more general channels. And we can get into specifics as well. But right now, it's like, let's take inventory and let's make the conversation about the things that we are still hung up on, the ways the game is still frustrating or limited to us. And that way, if we're discussing it, well, then there's a good chance Capcom hears it and maybe we see those changes implemented. All right, so, well, if we don't mean make it perfect, what kind of things might we be focusing in on? I want to look a little bit back on Street Fighter V's story thus far. Every time we've had an opportunity for one of these major balance overhauls, the conversation in the community has widely been around, and deservedly so been around, overwhelming offense. There's been a lot of problems in Street Fighter V that can be boiled down to it's too offense heavy, right? And that's individual characters right up into just the V trigger and V system mechanics have been a little bit too tuned in one direction. And Capcom has been whittling away at those things, right? And oftentimes, like around this time last year, let's say, we were talking about a handful of ridiculously powerful characters, usually with really powerful V-triggers. And Capcom attended to that in a broad way by implementing the V-shift mechanic, which I think has done a lot of good for the game. And I'd like to stop there and ask you, though, because V-shift has been a little bit like, people are like, yeah, it's good, it doesn't do anything. Where do you see V-shift in terms of how helpful it's been for balancing Street Fighter V's offense and defense?
It's really an underrated mechanic. It was the CPT, not Japan this last weekend, but the one before at the East Coast one, and you actually saw V-shift regularly used by the best players from the East Coast, and it's a big factor right now. And again, this is such a Marvel Street Fighter game with Street Fighter V. Like, offense is always going to be, you know, the dominant thing, and we're actually kind of expecting that to be the same case with Street Fighter 6. Like, you know, maybe 60-40. It's better if it's 50-50, but in this day and age of esports and other stuff, I think that if you're going to be biased towards one side, it's going to be offense. So it's really important that you also don't keep that offense like at an 80-20 ratio or something like that, which I think there's parts of Street Fighter V where you could say it was like an 80-20, like defense is just not even a factor practically at all. You better be really good at your offense or just not being in the spots on screen. And I think the game has really shifted now to, it's a shifted, I really do think the game has shifted to a very nice spot overall where it makes sense with what Street Fighter V is, how it plays right now.
Yeah, so the effects of V-shift were not immediately apparent. We weren't seeing it in every round, and we're kind of questioning, this isn't doing a ton every round. I don't see the effects of it, but I think that the decision-making processes, that it adds another layer of potential escape for the defender, and another juggling pin for the aggressor to have to deal with. In certain situations, the aggressor might think, well, I'm going to do my anti V shift route. And if the person that's defending doesn't V shift, well, they probably just escaped that pressure just because of the fact that V shift existed, and neither, they didn't use it at all. The other thing about it is that it saps directly away from your potential to use V trigger, which have been the overwhelming problematic for offensive reasons a lot in this game. So I do think that it has been a very good mechanic, and I am impressed and happy with Capcom in their implementation of it. So the needle has certainly moved away from offense. I think we can both agree on that. And we so often have said this year, Street Fighter V's balance is in a better place than it ever has been. Fair enough. Now, last year, like I said, we were talking about some pretty crazy things that certain characters could do. Like Akuma could side switch out of the corner for no meter, and how advantageous that was. Some of the things about his air fireball, and we've seen some crazy things like Abigail's Season 3 V-Trigger, Minot's Season 3 V-Trigger. All the way back in Season 1, Armika's Oki and crazy set play things. And a lot of those things have been attended to. But that's where a lot of the issues have been, at the top of the tier lists and such. And this year, we haven't heard as much when it comes to those types of things. Now, that tells me, one, we have moved from a place of egregious error in terms of the top tiers being way too powerful to well, maybe we've fixed it, or maybe we've just moved it down a rung or two. And when you and I were sort of talking about this, I was starting to say something, or at least I think the conversation felt like I was saying, we're pretty good with where the top tiers are, and you had a stark reaction to that.
Yeah.
So, John, I want to ask you, in terms of some of the best characters in the game, does Capcom need to still be attending to the likes of, I don't even want to put characters' names out there, but certain top tier characters? And if so, like, have they been dealt with fully, or are there still some that need to be directly dealt with?
Answer is hell freaking yeah. And and since you don't want to put names out there, I will. That's
no, I want you to.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just didn't want to put them out there before.
All good.
Bias.
Cammy, Urian, Rashid. It's giving really quick examples because we've covered this a lot. Cammy, her super, once you do a ton of damage on it, and the most easy hit confirms on the planet, you get a double dash for great Okazemi. That should be removed from the game entirely. No character in the game should get that. No character in the game should be able to do a super that does 500 damage or more and gives them great Okazemi pressure. That's just a really fundamentally stupid design decision and should not be in the game.
It's only season like 1 and like base roster, season 1, maybe season 2 characters still get it, I think. But it seems like Capcom has written that out. Oki after critical art, which I really think they should, but for some reason they didn't touch a lot of the characters that had it early on in the game's life. But I 100% agree with you that like she does not need that.
Yeah, and you say for some reason, it's because Capcom can't nerf Cammy. There's something about it, like they click the nerf button and like their hand keeps slipping onto the buff button instead. So I mean, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. But going on, also Urian actually has matchups where he is one of the best fireball characters in the entire game. That should not be a thing. Urian should not be competing with the Guiles and the Roses and other stuff out there. But his V skill 2 charges so quickly. They need to add an extra like 2 to 4 frames on that because it's stupid fast right now. And in some matchups, Urian just becomes dominant. And it's like he does not need that. Like Urian he's not that style of character. It's like taking Rufus in Street Fighter 4 and giving him like one of the best fireball games too. And it's like, what are you doing? That he's not that style of character. Again, Urian does have projectiles. He has all this kind of stuff, but don't give him one of the best options in the game for it. Make that an add-on to what he's doing, and so that you increase the charge time. And then Rashid, pretty much everything Rashid does.
I'm seeing some stuff with Rashid. Now, I haven't been running into a lot of Rashids, and I've seen some complaints, and I've seen him consistently still placed high on a lot of tier lists. But I think it was in Street Fighter League, it was like a week or two ago, someone was playing Rashid and just went off the wall in the corner 3 or 4 times in a row, and it was the Dawson player, I think it was Mr. Crimson, just couldn't do anything about it seemingly, the character character looked like, I just wrote an article about the Rashid mod in UMVC3. The character looks so much like a Marvel character in a Street Fighter atmosphere, and that stuff can be so frustrating.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it basically the not it's they need to look at Rashid's corner options a little bit more. I get that that's his design. Like he actually makes sense where he's a highly mobile character. That is actually what Rashid is based around with all of his air attacks and stuff like that. But the thing about it is you don't want a character to be able to break the meta like that, where you get cornered in this game, and it should be a very big disadvantage for everyone. I don't care. And it's okay if Rashid has a few more options to escape than your average character because of his mobility, but right now his options are still a little too good. And so you'd want to knock that down. And again, it's if you look at the stuff in a vacuum and you compare Rashid to Cammy, you're like, oh, well, that's fine. It's like, no, don't do that. Compare Rashid to like Alex, our Jury, our Oro, or something like that, and that's where it really starts being an issue. And that's how come I'm such a big advocate for knocking down these top tiers, because it's not about comparing the top tiers to each other. That's a really foolish idea. You've got 45 characters. You want to make as many of those 45 characters as good as possible, and that's how come I think the top tiers need to be knocked down, because it's still the level of balance at the highest ends of tournaments is still pretty abysmal. It's you just don't see enough character variety. It's better than it ever has been, but it's still not enough.
That's the other side of this, or the other part of this argument, I should say, is that maybe these characters aren't overwhelmingly strong to the point where they're ruining the game, and certainly not to the degree that they were before. But then you want to ask, well, should you get other characters? Like, do we want a changing of the guard at the top tier? Do we want to see some fresh faces in tournament, like top 8s and stuff along those lines, and not just like 3 Rashids, 2 Cammies, and then maybe roll the dice for a Urian and a Bison? But really quickly on Rashid, I was also looking at him specifically because he has popped up as one of the strongest characters still. And if I were to quantify it, it's something like his normals and his offense are really good. And then they've tuned that down a little bit, thank goodness. And they've tuned down his ability to escape from the corner, although maybe that's a secret buff nerf because of the angle or something like that. I'm not sure.
That's Rashid players trolling. I have to jump in on that one. He is definitely worse. If you go back and watch like season 2 and season 3 footage of what Rashid could do in the corner, it's a night and day difference. In good old Rashid players, I will just say there's a number of top players who play Rashid. You should never listen to a word that comes out of their mouth. There's a few exceptions out there. Shouts to JB, because I think JB gives really good assessments of what Rashid can do, and he's very honest about the character. Most of the other top players who play Rashid don't listen to a word that comes out of their mouth. Yeah.
Well, the character is clearly a very mobile character, as you noted, and especially with his V skill 2 now, when he goes to the air, he can jump in the air and do a regular jump. He can dive kick down. He can zip back and fall. He can zip back and then zip forward with a kick. But the point is, he has tons of extra options once he goes to the air. He's also very strong horizontally, as he's got a run into the spin. He's got really good normals. What that all equates to is he can initiate offense like no other character. He is one of the best at initiating offense. He can choose when he wants to. He can do it from the air. He can do it from the ground. Now, if that's the case, fair enough. You want to give the character some kind of a flavor and some kind of an ability that's better than most others, you can do that. But if you were going to do that, then once he's there and offense has been initiated, he shouldn't have amazing, strong pressure. And it feels like, and maybe he shouldn't have incredible damage output. And it's like maybe they could attend to those facets of the character so that, yeah, he can start stuff really easily, but he's got to hit you maybe once or twice more compared to your average character that can't start stuff so easily. Something like that might be a good balance for Rashid. But I don't want to get too lost in the particulars there. I want to ask too about 2 other characters that have been at the top before and maybe aren't anymore. Bison and Akuma. Where do you feel like they're right now?
They're both like right around the top 10. I think Bison is in the top 10. I think Akuma might have fallen out of it now. If they left Akuma pretty much intact, I would not be upset because I think they've actually properly addressed him. I don't run into him nearly as much as I used to, and he's still one of the more popular characters. So it's like, yeah, that feels about right. Bison is still so brain dead easy to play, and just watching people just go and stand heavy kick and do a bunch of other crap and just not really...
Oh, you think Bison needs more then?
Oh, Bison definitely
needs to get hit harder.
Yeah, I've watched way too many CPT tournaments, pretty much all of them, and Bison is still a very dominant presence out there, where Akuma has definitely been attended to. Bison's still just ridiculously bad. And again, he's got the Kami disease. When you have a brain dead easy character to play, you do not want to make him that dominant. Akuma's not brain dead easy. He never has been. That's never been a complaint you and I have levied at him. It is a big issue with the Kamis and the Bisons out there. Balrog too, but Balrog at least is not that good. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I want to make sure that we are at least aware of is to not think that, okay, it used to be really bad. Capcom implemented V-Shift and nerfed a handful of the top tiers to a decent degree where we're not talking about them anymore. Is it fixed? It's like maybe we went from really bad to just bad, and then we're like, okay, we'll meet you halfway and be content with bad. It's like, well, no, if we're doing this game for another year and then you're just supplying it as a service, then you should make the game better for this coming year, and every year that you support it, it should make the game a little bit better. So I think that you're right in that you can still be attending to some of the top tiers. One, because they might be just ridiculous, or they might be clearly overpowered from where you want them to be, and two, because we want to see a changing of the guard a little bit. So I'm not as against Luke being up there, not just because I'm a Luke player, but because like he's brand new. It's like that's a good look for the game,
Yes.
especially if he's going to lead us into Street Fighter 6. There's an argument for him to be up there.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so the other side of this coin is to talk about.
I just before we move on from Luke, I would nerf him too in this March patch. He's had his good run here and he's doing really well, but I would knock him down now a little bit. Now that people have very clearly picked him up and played him, one of the most obvious things I think is just his crush counter button. It's -2, and he can just fish with it neutral all day long. Well, not all day long, but way too much. And right now I would knock it to -4, and it maybe increase the pushback a little bit, so he just can't randomly throw it out there and have good things happen for him. He's got to actually kind of be calculated with it, and if he's a little too close with it, he's not spaced perfectly, he gets punished with the jab punish, and just something like that would really increase the feeling of being more fair, kind of thing. Like if I'm playing Jury and you're playing Luke, it's like I don't feel like that's fair, kind of thing. Like you've got a very distinctive advantage. We both go to the same character select screen, but it's all about getting that parity in there as best you can. And when you're able to fish, like we've kind of universally decided that fishing for crush counters and neutral is fairly scrubby, because the risk reward is just so heavily advantaged with you. You've got to make sure that the risk is more increased there, and being a -4 on your crush counter button, when you've got other buttons you can just kind of do, I think would do that, and you could still do it. You just have to be smart with it. You can't just throw it out there.
Yeah, I think about Akuma's forward fear, or not forward fears, but his, his
Being
crouching,
-2.
his down forward.
Yeah, crouching heavy punch. Yeah, it's bull crap. But right now I would actually make the case that Luke is a better character than Akuma, and Akuma has been heavily dealt with in other regards. I'm not a big fan of that one either. But at least he has some clear weaknesses I don't think that Luke necessarily has right now.
Luke has above average health and I think stun as well. And I don't. My friend John, not you, a different John, in case you were wondering. My friend from Phoenix in the FGC up there would said last night we were talking, and he said, it would actually just be good to reduce his health and his vitality, because he doesn't need that, and that's something that you could very easily tweak down. But that feels like the kind of thing where if you're creating a kind of an inflated character for DLC new release purposes, we want this character to be particularly good, that's a really easy category to give them a pretty big advantage in, and then reduce it later if you want to then kind of shave them down a little bit after they've had their initial run and gotten some of a charismatic following. So yeah, I would imagine as a Luke player, don't do anything to him. Give him more stuff. But also as a someone who wants to see Street Fighter V get better, sure, maybe hit his vitals a little bit or something like that.
And I do want to just mention that I love how Luke has come out and where he is at right now. This is what a DLC character should be in these games. When you have the Oros come out and they flop right from the get-go, that's terrible. You never want that. You want characters to make a big splash like Luke as close as you can without them being overpowered. I do not think Luke is overpowered. I still have him in my top 10 range, but he is very good. And now that he's had this great run of 6 months or something like that, no, go ahead and reduce him down a little bit. We know he's going to be good. A bunch of people are going to stick with him. Go from there.
6 months meaning when this balance patch rolls out.
Yeah,
we'll
be about
5 or something.
5 or 6 months, something like that. When the March.
Just wanted to save you from some mean comments.
I appreciate that.
Anyway,
comment below, everyone, and tell me how bad I suck. No, anyway, you're kidding.
Yes. Tell John how bad he sucks. Speaking of things that suck, low tier characters are the other side of this. Now, it's more efficient, as you kind of alluded to nerf top tiers because that helps out everybody else in terms of them fighting these characters who are going to be fairly popular. But then if you are buffing up low tiers, it's like it's really going to only kind of affect that character. So your change doesn't go necessarily as far, but this is still necessary. And a lot of the attention that goes more into this category tends to be driven toward characters that have expectations around them, and those expectations aren't being met. Case in point, Ryu. Ryu should be somewhere around the middle of every Street Fighter roster at this point, kind of a 5-5 matchup across the board where you can get the job done. He can deal with just about anybody, but he's not amazingly good, right? And just kind of the real meat and potatoes character that all the other characters sort of are balanced and designed around, at least to an extent. And Ryu was a laughably bad character in Street Fighter V, and people were not okay with this. You need your poster boy to be either mid-tier or a little above that. Same kind of a thing happened with Sagat. There's an expectation for Sagat to be this powerhouse, the original fighting game boss, and Sagat, and all of his legacy, and he comes out underwhelming. Not a good look. Juri has a ton of charisma. Everyone loves Juri. She needs to be better than where she's at. And even Alex, who's not traditionally been a good character, the expectations for him are still to be better than joke status, right? And so certain characters, and Nash is in there too, certain characters have been highlighted as like, we do not accept where these characters have landed on the tier list because of our expectations about them individually.
Yeah, I think one of the major things about these balance patches, they touch every character, but if you know a character is distinctively low tier, you need to give them one or two very good quality buffs for them. Like don't give Juri extra animation on her fireball or something like that as her buff. Like actually, give her one of the things that we've always advocated for, and I don't know, maybe it's, breaking the game in the process, but something like Juri, like giving her one of her charges from the very start. Like just one, and that's something all Juri players I've talked to practically have asked for, and I mean it seems reasonable. I've never played with her like that, of course, but I mean a lot of Juri players just instantly double backdash and then charge up their thing. It's like, so they're giving up all this space, all this real estate right from the get-go just to get that. It's like, we'll give that to them. Like, is it going to be that game breaking to give Juri that compared to all the other characters? I don't think so. And so it's really important with every character, especially if they're low tier or considered lower mid, you give them something substantial, not just a random, now they have a new taunt animation or something like that. Like sometimes in the past, especially with Street Fighter 4, it really felt that way for some of the characters.
I remember they gave Hakan the oiled up status when he began, and I mean that was something for him, but it certainly didn't break him or anything like that. I don't disagree for Juri in particular that maybe she gets that and that would be good for her. But I do think that we are at a point where Capcom could spend a little more time, at least than they have in the past, trying to make these characters not necessarily just good, but make their risk reward feel appropriate. I think that's a better way of approaching what it means to properly balance a character. And you feel the frustration. It's harder to experience that when you're at, talking about a top tier because everything feels great because everything's working all the time. But you go to and that's like the inverse of it. You can probably tell that things are not balanced because stuff's feeling a little too great too often, but that's not going to be super conspicuous to the person that's going through those emotions. The person that's on the lower end and is constantly feeling frustrated here and frustrated there and like they can't do what they should be able to do in certain situations, there you're going to find where the risk and reward just does not feel balanced and people are going to be a little bit louder about it. And the other, I played in Wednesday Night Fights last night, right? And I ended up losing to Brian F's Oro because I had like no idea how to fight that character. Now, Dream King has played Oro a decent bit, but we've only played a handful of times, and he hasn't been playing Oro recently. And then I lost to a Fong. And one of the things about these characters that would be good for tournament players is if lower tier characters are not necessarily the best in the game, but if they are properly balanced so that risk and reward feels good, more people are going to play those characters, and you're going to have more of a chance of actually getting firsthand experience dealing with these characters. And it's one thing to do your math research and figure out the frame data and all that stuff, and you should do that. But it's another thing to just have continued experience against someone that knows what they're doing with these characters. And it's like it really sucks when you run into one of them and you just like you didn't lose because they might have outplayed you as well, but also there's that factor of like, man, and I don't have experience against this character. It's like there's a lot of characters like that right now in this game where like they're just not getting much attention. And then that's always going to sort of happen, but the more you can finely tune them to feel balanced and therefore fun, the more you're going to motivate people to play them, and the more experience everyone's going to get as playing as them and playing against them. And I think that's a really good look that this game could use right now, because I run into like maybe 7 or 8 different characters consistently, and then every once in a while, the rest of the cast, one of the rest of the cast might pop up in my ranked sessions, and I'd like to see a little more variety. So that might be another goal that is, or a box that is checked if you attend to the lower tiers.
I mean, here's the thing I look at this is like you have all these DLC characters. You have the launch cast, which has been fairly dominant here, and then like the season 1 characters. That's pretty much like the core of your tournament results and rank play, right? Why have you released all these other DLC characters if people aren't playing them? Like, why have you put all this effort into, again, I'll go back to Oro, someone like that. It's like, why did you put all that effort into them if no one's going to play them? And it just, again, it's the Luke argument all over again. It's like, make these characters pretty much universally, with some exceptions, like, grapplers, like we generally don't want them to be top tier, but make them good enough where the community is actually compelled to pick them up collectively and play them. Like that should
make them satisfying.
Exactly. And now, I will say this because we haven't talked about Rose at all, and that's my main. I love Rose in this game. Hands down, my favorite version of the character. I think she's phenomenal. She could probably use to be a little bit better than she is right now, but she's also a frustrating character to play. I think she's getting enough traction, but she probably should get a little bit more in the way of buffs and other things. And she's a more recent character, and again, she started off out of the gate a little bit too weak. People thought her -4 stuff was going to be just incredible. It's like it's -4, just block and punish, kind of thing. So yeah, it's yeah.
Where would you put her? Around bottom 15, bottom 20?
Yeah, somewhere thereabouts. I don't think she's in the upper half of the game. I think the best case for her is mid tier, but probably like lower mid. I don't think she's bottom 10. But as you say, bottom 15, bottom 20.
All right. So this is a vast oversimplification because there are so many facets that go into balancing a fighting game, especially when you're attending to the entire roster, right? You might implement a new mechanic. You might change some global things, and that's all good. But from where we are right now, we can very distinctly talk about the high tier, nerfing the high tiers and buffing the low tiers. And that's kind of like the situation we've sort of made this into at this point. So I want to ask you, if you had 100% of Capcom's development team's mana to devote to either nerfing problematic top tiers or buffing problematic low tiers, how would you disperse that?
Hands down, hit the top tiers, nerf them, because that impacts the entire game. Where if I go back and I adjust Jury and I spend a ton of time on her, that only really helps Jury players. I'm very heavily on the hit the top tiers and hit them fairly hard, because again, you really want good parity in these games, and when that is missing, you're really selling your game short. You're really just like you're making like 20 cast members or 15 cast members super viable, and then the rest is just kind of like, there it is, and that is a bad look for your games when your game has 45 characters in it.
Do you think that they need to do any further mechanical or global changes to help just the general flow of things?
I think we're
similar to what they did with V-Shift.
Yeah, I think we're good there. I don't think they have that in them. I think now it's just a character balance type thing. It's one of the cases we haven't talked about him yet, but Guile's quite a bit better now with V-Shift, and he needs to be attended to. I'd
like to see Guile get smacked in the face twice with a Nerf bat.
Yeah, with this double roundhouse sweep with Nerf bats on it or something like that. Anyway, Guile needs to be hit a little bit, for sure. And there's a few other people that have kind of come up here. But yeah, if you hit the top tiers, you get the entire game at that point, because they're the most played characters, the most dominant characters.
So is that like 80% spent towards nerfing top tiers and 20% sort? What would your percentages be?
Yeah, something like that. Maybe 70-30. Because I would like to see the lower tiers hit as well. Because like I said, you want to give everyone something. But again, it's not necessarily nerfing like just to nerf. It's like making sure that the risk reward is proper. It's like, hey, when Rashid gets cornered, let's not have him have so many free escapes. Let's make this a real punishing thing for him, so that he, is really taking proper risk when he puts himself in the corner or gets cornered for that matter. And he can't just, reverse the situation so easy. Really, it's not just, nerfs for nerfs. It's like making the nerfs make a lot of sense.
Mhm. If it were up to me, I would say I would like to see 30% spent, maybe 35% spent attending to overpowered top tier abilities and such, hitting Guile, Rashid, Cammy, and the like. But I would like to see some 65 or 70% spent, not necessarily just buffing low tiers, but making low tiers feel satisfying to play even where they're at. And so in some cases, that's going to mean they're going to need to move up because maybe the expectations for a character are not congruent with where they actually are in the tier list. But most of the time, I just want people are okay with playing low tier characters, right? People are okay with playing Zangief, even though Zangief has very clear restrictions, and you go into it or very quickly learn that if you're going to play Zangief, you're going to have like a mental battle every single time you play around, and you're taking that on because this is the style you want to play, and that's all good. People will accept that. People will accept that their character is not as good as the next character. That's okay. What they want to do is have a game plan with that character that is satisfying and possible, right? And if that's the case, especially across the board where you don't have some character out there that when you get into this matchup, your character just falls completely apart or something like that. You can have advantageous matchups, sure, but like falls completely apart. Just make these characters fun. Make it so like if I'm a jury player, I can set up this particular goal and this strategy, and I can realize it, a certain amount of the time where it makes me feel like, yeah, well, maybe I'm not the best, but at least I can do what I want to do with my character, and that's fun and satisfying. And you can, the top tiers can be the top tiers at that point. So I would hope that I would approach balancing the game with that kind of a spirit. And I don't think that I think that V-Shift has done its job, widely speaking. It doesn't make the game perfect, but it's done a lot for it, and I'm very happy with it. So that's sort of where I'm at in terms of what I'd like to see. But I'd like to hear from all of you guys. Let us know in the comments what you would like to see attended to most, whether that's making sure that the top tiers are shaved down a little bit, whether it's like please attend to the lower tiers, or if you'd like to see some bigger general sweeping changes with the mechanics or the flow of the game. Let us know, and let Capcom know, right? Because it's like they've probably figured out most of what they want to do, but who knows? And maybe they postpone it again, and maybe we can get some influence and make the game closer to what we are hoping for its potentially final year.
Well said.